Welcome back to the Simulator series. In today's episode, we are going to be creating the Rebirth shop GUI. As always, if you guys do enjoy the video or it does help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also hit the subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you get notified every time I upload a brand new episode. Of course, I also have a Patreon if you guys like to support me and gain access to all the scripts and the game file I make during this episode. There's a link down below in the description, and you guys can go check that out. With that being said, let's hop right into it. So to get right into it, we of course are going to get started off by creating the GUI. So to do this, we're going to go inside of the Star GUI, and we're going to add a brand new Screen GUI inside of here, and we're going to rename this to Rebirth Shop. Once we do that, we're going to be sure to set reset on spawn to false, and then inside of the Screen GUI, we're going to add a brand new frame. Now, of course, let's scale this frame up, so we'll update the size, and then we also want to center this as well, so 0.5, 0.5, just like that. Now, for the actual size of the frame on the X, I'm going to go with 0.3 and 0.5 on the Y, so kind of a normal, basic, almost square, but taller rectangle. Then what we'll do is set the background color of this, and we're going to go with a nice light blue. Next, what we'll do is go ahead and add the title and the exit button, and we can get this from pretty much any of our other GUIs, so we're going to copy the title text label as well as the exit text button, and we're going to paste those directly into the frame. Now for the title text label, we want to make this a little bit larger, so I'm going to go with 0.45 on the x-axis and 0.11 on the y. Now for the actual text, for right now, we're going to say Rebirth Pets in all capital letters, and then for the stroke transparency, we're going to set that to 0.9. Now the position of this is fine. It is centered horizontally, and it appears a little bit from the top of the GUI, so that's all that we want. But going over to the exit button, we're going to resize this a little bit. Now I resized it a tiny bit, and I think the sizing's fine. But next, what we want to do is reposition this one so that it's aligned with the bottom of the title text label, and then we're going to also move it over to the right a little bit. Now our X text label did kind of get repositioned, so let's go ahead and recenter that. And now that's looking pretty good. Next, what we'll do is throw a frame inside of here, and we're going to rename this to buttons. Now for the size, I'm going to go with 0.15 on the X and 0.5 on the Y. We want it to be a little bit of a taller frame, but not too wide. And then for the position, on the Y scale for both the anchor point and the position, we're going to set that to 0.5 so that we can center that vertically. And now what we want to do with the buttons frame is we want to reposition this a little bit to the left of our main frame right here. So what we're going to do is set the X scale of the position to negative 0.175. And now this frame is appearing to the left of our main frame. Then what we're going to do is throw a UI grid layout inside of here, and then we're going to add an image button. Now we're going to rename this image button to pets, and then go into the UI grid layout. For the cell size, we're going to set the X scale to 1 and the Y scale to 0.5 because we want the image buttons to be the entire width and then just half the height because we're actually going to have two buttons inside of here. And then for the cell padding for right now, we're just going to set that to 0. Then for the horizontal alignment, we're going to set that to center as well as the vertical alignment. And then let's go to our pets button. Now for the image of this button, we're actually going to set it to the menu button background right here. And then for the image color, we're actually just going to make this a red. Next, what we'll do is duplicate the title text label and bring that inside of the pets button. We're going to rename this text label to top. And now for the text, we're going to say Rebirth. And now we of course want to resize this. So on the X scale, we're going to set that to 0.8. And on the Y scale, we'll set that to 0.3. And now the text is looking pretty good. Next, what we'll do is duplicate this text label and rename this one to bottom. Now for the text of this, we're going to say pets. And then we just want to reposition this. So on the Y scale, we're going to set this to 0.675. And now that text label is appearing towards the bottom. Then what we'll do is throw an image label inside of here, and we're going to rename this to icon. Now for the position, we are going to center this, so 0.5 for everything. And then for the size, we're going to go with 0.85 on both the X and the Y. Now for the scale type, we want to make sure that we set that to fit, and then we actually want to set the image. Now for the image label, we're going to go with the pet icon right here, and for the image color, we're going to set that to a black. We'll then set the background transparency to 1, and now for both the bottom and the top text labels, we want to set the Z index of these to 2. And since we've updated the Z index, those text labels now appear above the icon. Now additionally, I might make the icon a little bit smaller, so I might make it 0.75 instead, and of course you can keep adjusting it to however you like. Next, what we'll do is we'll go back to the pet's image button. We want to set the background transparency of this to 1, and then we want to set the scale type to fit. Now that we've done that, we'll go ahead and duplicate the pet's button, and we're going to rename this one to buttons. Now for the image color of this image label, we're going to go with a nice bright blue. Then going inside of the button, we're going to update the icon, and the image that we want to go with for this is actually the Rebirth icon small, and then for the image color, we want to set that back to a white so that we can see what the image normally looks like. Now that I can see what the image looks like, I think that I'm going to want to make this a lot smaller, so I'm going to set this to 0.5 on both the X and the Y, and I think that looks much better, so I'm going to actually do that for both of the icons. So 0.5 and 0.5, and now I think they definitely look better when they're not overlapped so much by the text. Now for the top text label, that should still say Rebirth, but for the bottom text label, we actually want to say buttons. Cool, and now that we've done that, we're actually done creating both those buttons. What we can then do is play around with the padding a little bit, and on the Y scale of the padding, I'm going to go with 0.05 so that there's just a little space between the two. Then we can actually set the background transparency of the buttons frame to 1. We no longer see that white background, and now we have the button set up on the left side of our GUI. Next, what we're going to do is add a scrolling frame inside of our frame, and we're going to rename this to container. Now for the size of this, let's go ahead and make sure that we set that to scale, and then let's go ahead and manually resize this ourselves. So we pretty much want this to almost be the entire width of the frame, and then we also want it to be pretty tall as well. Next, let's go ahead and make sure that we center this horizontally, so 0.5 on the X there and 0.5 on the X there. there. Then we want to set the border size pixel to 0 so that we no longer see that black line. For the scroll bar thickness, I'm going to go with an 8. And then I'm also going to lighten this as well, so I'm going to make the color relatively white. Then for the background transparency, we can actually set that to 1. Next, what we want to do is we actually want to set the automatic canvas size to Y. Now, the reason that we're going to do that is because inside of this container, that's going to allow us to display unlimited objects inside of there, and I'll show you exactly how that works in a minute. So next, what we're going to do is throw a UI grid layout inside of the container, and then we're also going to throw a frame inside of here as well, and we'll rename that to template. Next, what we're going to do is adjust the Y scale of the canvas size and set that to 1 instead of 2. Now that we've done that, we can go to our UI grid layout, and for the cell size, we're going to set that to 0.975 on the X scale and 0.3 on the Y. Now, the reason that we set this to 0.3 is because we basically only want to be able to show off 3 at max. So let's go ahead and duplicate this. And now we're only able to actually see 3 templates fully at a single time. Now, additionally, when we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we of course are no longer able to scroll anymore. Let's go ahead and duplicate this template one more time. And now we can see that the container actually updated itself, and now we're able to scroll even further. So now this container size is scaled based off the amount of children displayed inside of it. So that's where the automatic canvas sizing comes in place. Now that I was able to teach that lesson, let's go back to the top and let's actually go ahead and mess with the cell padding. Now I'm going to set this to 0 on the X, and I'm going to set this to 0.01 on the Y, so there's just a little bit of spacing between each of them. Then we'll set the horizontal alignment to center, and then going back to the container, we want to set the vertical inset to always. And now that we've done that, let's go ahead and delete all of our templates, just leaving one. Let's go ahead and update the background color of this frame, so we're going to set it to a darker blue. Then inside of this frame, we're going to throw in another frame, and we're going to rename this to icon. Now, of course, for the size, we want to make sure that we scale this, so 0.2, 0.2, and then we're going to resize this a little bit more. So we almost want it to be the full height of the frame, and we pretty much want to make a square, so I think that looks pretty good. Now we want to make sure that we center this vertically, so let's go ahead and set that to 0.5 as well as that. Now inside of this icon frame, we're going to add a viewport frame to this. For the position, we want to make sure that we center this, so let's go ahead and set all that to 0.5, and then for the size on both the X and the Y, we're going to set that to 0.85. We then also want to make sure that we set the background transparency to 1. Then inside of here, we're going to add an image label. We're going to rename this to icon. For the background transparency, we're going to set that to 1. For the image, we're going to go with the Rebirth icon, and then we're going to set the image color to a lighter blue. Then for the scale type, we of course want to make sure that we set that to fit. We'll then resize this as well. So on both the X and the Y, we're going to set that to 0.8. And then we also want to center this, so 0.5, 0.5, and that's looking great. Next, what we're going to do is set both the viewport frame and the icon to not be visible, because whenever we generate this template is when we're going to make either of these visible. So to make our work a little bit easier, we're going to set both these to not visible instead of having to make one visible and one not visible when we script it. Now that we're done with that, what we'll then do is duplicate the title text label and bring that inside of the template. Let's then update the text of this, and we're going to say add 50 rebirth button, and then we also want to set the text X alignment to left. We'll then update the size, and on the Y scale, we'll set that to 0.25, while on the X, we're going to set that to 0.6. Now that we've done that, let's just reposition it a tiny bit, and if you're wondering what my position is, that's what it looks like right here. Next, what we're going to do is duplicate the title text label, and we're going to rename this to price. Now for the text of this, let's just say something like 999.99M. Now we're going to resize this a bit. We're just going to make this a tiny bit smaller than the title text label, so we're just going to set this to 0.2 on the Y. We then also want to move this a little bit further down, so we're going to set the position on the Y scale to 0.35. In addition to that, we want to move this over a little bit more on the X axis, but I'm just going to update the anchor position to be 0, 0, and then for the position on the X scale, we're going to set that to 0.25. We can then also resize this a little bit. Realistically, the text label doesn't have to be too big, so I'm just going to resize it to about that size. Next, what we're going to do is go inside of the icon and duplicate the icon image label, and then we're going to put that inside of the template. We'll then rename this to currency, and then for the actual image of this, we're going to set that to the gems currency icon. We then also want to make this visible. Now for the size of this, we want to make this relatively small. On the X scale, we're going to set that to 0.032, and on the Y, we're going to set that to 0.2, so it matches the size of our price text label. We then want to position this image label to the left of the price text label. So for the anchor point, we're going to set both of those to 0, and for the position on the X, we're going to set that to 0.21, and for the position on the Y scale, we're going to set that to 0.35. Now they're not looking too bad, but they're definitely closer towards the middle than we want them. So what we're going to do is highlight both the currency and the price text label, and then we're just going to simply drag it over a little bit. And now that we've dragged it over, we can hit escape, and now we can see what they look like, and they actually look positioned pretty perfectly. So if you're wondering what the position of the currency image label is, that's what it is for me, and this is the position of the price text label as well. The next thing that we're going to do is throw in a text button inside of our template frame, and we're going to rename this to buy. Now for the background color of this, we're going to go with a nice green. We're going to set the text of this to blank so there is no text. For the size, we of course want to make this scale, so we're going to say 0.2, 0.2, and then we want to move this down a little bit. Now actually, I think my sizing was pretty good. We might want to make this just a little bit taller, I'm thinking, and maybe a little bit longer, but I actually think that that bun's pretty good. So since I like how the bun looks, the next thing I'll do is duplicate the title text label and put that inside of the bun. Now for the size of this, we're going to go with 0.8 on both the X and the Y. GUI. For the position, we of course want to center this, so 0.5, 0.5. And for the text of this, we want to say bye. We'll then set the text X alignment back to center, and that button looks pretty good. Now we have one more text label left to add, so what we're going to do is duplicate the title text label, and we're going to rename this to left. Now for the text of this, we're actually going to say 3 left. And for the text X alignment, we actually want to set this to right. Then what we're going to do is just drag this to the bottom right of the frame, and then we're going to also make this a little bit smaller as well. Now looking at that, I do like that, but I do want to move it a little bit from the right side of the GUI. So rather than repositioning it, what I'm actually going to do is set the text X alignment to left, and that gives it just a little bit of space, which I think looks much better. Next, let's start making this look a little bit better. So what we're going to do is add in a UI corner to the template. For the corner radius of this, we're going to set that to 0.1 for the scale. We'll then duplicate that, throw that inside of the icon frame, and we can honestly leave this one at 0.1 as well. We'll then duplicate that again and throw that inside of the buy button. Now for the buy button, I definitely want to make this a little bit more round, so I'm going to set that to 0.3, and I think that looks perfect. And now we're pretty much done with making this template look a little bit better. What we'll then do is duplicate the template, and we're going to rename this one to unlock. We'll then go inside of this template, inside of the icon, and we're going to delete the viewport frame. We'll then click on the icon, make this be visible, and then for the image of this, we actually want to get our lock icon, and then we want to set the image color to black. Now that we've done that, we're going to delete all of the other children inside of this frame except for the title text label. What we'll then do is set the text X alignment back to center, and then for the text of this, we're going to say unlock the next island for more Rebirth items, and then we're going to resize this. And I'm just going to manually drag this out a little bit, and I think that sizing looks pretty good. So let's make sure that we center this vertically, and that's looking pretty good to me. Now this unlock frame is basically always going to appear at the bottom of the container when the player scrolls all the way down, because we want to let them know how to unlock more items. And with all that being said, we're pretty much done with this GUI. The last thing I'm going to do is just add a little bit more details to this. So we're going to throw in a UI corner inside of this frame. We'll set the corner radius to 0.025, and that's about it. With that being said, that's going to be it for this episode. As always, if you guys did enjoy the video or did help you out, make sure you smash the like button, also hit the subscribe button, and turn post notifications on so you get notified every time I upload a brand new episode. As always, I also have Patreon. If you guys like to support me and you can access all the script and the game file that I made during this episode, there's a link down below the description, and you guys can go check that out. With that being said, I'll see you guys in the next episode.